So thank you for recalling the hip-hop dance that we made some years ago. I have no pictures of that. It was with this robot, HRP2, famous Japanese robot. And here it is entering in a kid room, special photo for Christian, that thinks that no intelligent being should enter in a kid room, apparently. That's the reason of having leg on a robot. It's to go anywhere. And that's a main reason for me for considering this robot. But also, I really like leg robot as being a very good test bed for robotics. So in particular, manipulation and locomotion are dual problems. So you have a lot in terms of models, in terms of methods that you get in both. I like particularly locomotion because the experimental hardware is mature compared to manipulation, where I really think that the experimental hardware is not mature at all. We have to make a lot of progress in hardware, and I'm not a hardware guy. For me, the kind of stuff that I'm doing with locomotion should impact in versatile manufacturing, in flying hands, and especially in mobile manipulators, which I think are the bottleneck today for interesting application in robotics. Initially, as you said, I'm from model predictive control, so the kind of problem that I consider, and still with reinforcement learning, I still consider that this is a problem to solve, is something like depicted by this picture from Colorado University, where you have an agent, so here a rabbit on a motorbike, which has a model of itself in the world, so typically a simulator, and would predict in the simulator what it's going to do, first achieving, go forward full gas and die after a while because you leave the road, turn a little bit before and die a little bit after because you are still too fast, and then slowly adapt until you cross the finish line. But you are not interested only to cross the finish line, but to be as fast as possible, and that would be the final iteration. So to achieve this kind of behavior, you would write what we call an optimal control problem, where you look at typically a policy. So a policy would be a control at any point of the state space, which would maximize a preview motion. So it would decide the preview motion, maximizing a reward, encoding the task, knowing the initial state, so what we call state feedback. State feedback could being extended to observation feedback if we want, and knowing a simulator and possibly robot constraints characterizing the movement. So to deploy that on real robots, what we did first is to combine that with supervised learning in what we call a memory of motion. So these problems are highly nonlinear, they are constrained, they are very difficult to solve. So we would solve that extensively offline on a cluster, and we would encode the solution to this problem into a memory, whatever machine learning structure, neural network, Gaussian mixture, whatever. And then online, you would query this memory to provide a good initial guess to the nonlinear program that then you would solve. And in particular, we developed an extensive knowledge in how to solve this kind of big optimization problem in real time with the tool library Pinocchio and Crocodile, and with a large leadership of Justin Carpentier, who was a PhD student and postdoc in my team before leading the team in Willow in Paris. So that you would hear just after that. And this is a bunch of results we obtained in 2 European projects that I coordinated. First on leg robots with the memory of motion project, and you would see several form factors of quadrupeds, of big bipeds, small quadrupeds, and exoskeleton for paraplegic people. And now in the Agimus project, where we are seeking for manufacturing manipulation tasks, so tasks where we want to control a robot at high speed with a very accurate tooling task, also controlling the forces. Okay, so this is model predictive control, and actually the solution to an optimal control problem is this twofold geometry, where you would typically consider only one side of the solution, either the trajectory. So in that case, you are likely in the motion planning community seeking for a 1D object, just a thread of the motion, or the policy, and in that case, if you are seeking a policy, you are likely in the reinforcement learning community. And these two communities are not exchanging so much. Also now there is more and more understanding that it is the same problem. We are still there where there is two communities not discussing so much together. In leg locomotion, while model predictive control has been the way to go until 2015, I would say, since 2015 and this initial proof of concept by ETH, we are now moving, we have moved to a pure reinforcement learning, and that's now the state of the art in leg locomotion. Sim-to-real reinforcement learning. And let me show you a little bit how we are implementing that on the robot and how we are contributing to make that better. So this is an example of a robot that we developed in the team called Solo, here achieving a kind of 3D parkour. Here, small quick tutorials of how we do that. So we want to optimize neural policy that would encode a function passing from the observation space to the action space, where here the observation would be a high-level command, V omega, coming from a joystick given by the user, joint angle, joint velocities measured by the coder of the robot, body orientation given by the inertial measurement units, and the last actions giving a little bit of history of what is happening. And terrain geometry, I'm going back to that. The output of the neural network would be the target joint angle. So that's what we call end-to-end reinforcement learning. Also, the target joint angle are then processed by a low-level controller that we typically call impedance controller or a PD plus controller. In that case here, for simplicity, we encode the environment by a set of points that we can easily get in simulation. And on the real robot, for this video I just have shown, you have some small markers and a mock-up system that is detecting where is the robot. We know the environment and we reconstruct the environment. I will go back to that later. So here, where I want to insist is what is the bottleneck in that. So when we want to pass from walking on flat terrain, 5 minutes of training on a single GPU, to walking any terrain, 10 hours of training still on the GPU a little bit bigger, what is the most costly is to engineer the reward function. So let me explain that. We are doing optimal control, and the premise of optimal control is that you can define a very simple objective function instead of a very difficult control function. So we want to walk, very likely the very simple objective function that you want to have is align the velocity of the robot with the commanded velocity. But if you do that, this is what is output by the simulator. And if you think about it, it's a very smart solution because it is inventing the concept of a wheel. Okay, that's super nice. But it is absolutely not what you want to do on the robot. And we don't have a lot of ideas in the community of why the simulator is accepting to produce that. Well, obviously the robot is going to break because of that, but also it's not completely realistic at all. So even a very stiff robot would not be able to do that. And then from that point, we have to inject knowledge in the reward function to prevent this behavior to happen. And this is normal. So in sport, we are doing that all the time. So for example, this is throwing weight, Olympic game, and that's typically what you would see during a competition. But actually, you maybe don't know that the most optimal movement is this one. And this is forbidden, because it's considered not to be elegant. Well, I think it's more elegant, but they don't like it. Then you put some rules saying that, no, you cannot compete like that. And that's exactly what we are doing with the locomotion. We don't like the robot doing the wheel. So we forbid that, and we say the angle of the body should be 5 degrees. And then we start to inject, so when you constrain the body of the robot to be at a certain angle, you would then see high frequency vibration appear on the legs, which is also a same behavior. That's a behavior that a big piano would have during earthquake, and that's actually moving. But you cannot do that with hardware neither. And you inject more and more reward, and you have to tune this reward because you have some weighting parameters that are not physical, and that have a high variance, inducing high variance behaviors when they are combined with the solver. So it's like a cat becoming crazy, and that's exactly the face of a PhD student after 1 month in my lab. And of course, nobody likes that. So one of the reasons why we have this behavior is that we are trying to inject some physical properties of the system, like torque violation, velocity violation, the fact that you should not hit the ground with your body. That's our physical limits that we know are going to break the robot. And that we are trying to inject that at the level of the reward function through penalties that should not be weighted, right? Is it more important to burn your motor or to break your body? No, I don't care. It's exactly the same important. So actually, we want to put that at the level of constraints, of hard constraints that you don't want the system to violate. And a good way to do that is to inject that as hard probabilistic constraints. So we call that chance programming. And basically, there is no solvers of reinforcement learning that is able to do that. So what we did is something pragmatic, is that we are reducing the discount factor based on constraint violation. So to explain that, let me just quickly go on what is the discount factor. When you see the typical OCP we put in a reinforcement learning solver, there is a reward term R, and in front of the reward term, there is a discount factor that is typically used to make sure that the theory converges to something that is a finite value. And you can interpret the discount factor as a probability of death. Most likely you are going to collect your reward, but there is a small chance that you are going to die in the middle, and you are not going to collect a reward forever. So what we are just saying is that instead of having a fixed probability of death, we are going to strongly increase the probability of death in case you are violating something we don't want you to violate. And you can rewrite that by saying we are injecting penalties, but not by summing them, but by multiplying them with a reward. And because we are multiplying them, we are now not subject anymore to a weighting effect. And what is very nice with this idea is that it just comes on top of any reinforcement learning solver. So if you want to do a PPO, so a very classical reinforcement learning solver, PPO with these CAT constraints, you just have to add 3 lines of code to PPO. You want to have a DDPG version of that or a SAC version of that, it's working as well. So next step, once we have that, so the video that I shown earlier, that's trained with CAT. It's missing now the perception. We want to bring the robot outdoor or where you don't have mocap. So the next step is to train the system with real video data. So we are using depth images. And a side effect of having depth images is that now at training time you need to generate the depth image, and that's costly. So we don't want to generate depth image while the robot is learning how to stand. Basically, that has no interest. But once it has learned how to basically control its balance, then we want to inject depth. So we do that in 2 phases. We are not using a student-teacher approach. Here we are really warm starting the second phase, which is also a reinforcement learning algorithm, so it's not behavior cloning. And we are warm starting that by injecting privileged experience into the buffer, into the replay buffer. So with that, we can really discover some active perception behaviors. And that's the result still on the same solo robot. So here all the decisions are taken on board. There is nothing that is coming from outside except the commanded velocities from the user. And here we spend a little bit more time tuning the reward function so that we see some parkour behaviors emerging, what they call parkour yet in quadruped locomotion. It's still not crazy, but you have a little bit of jump, a little bit of velocity of running effects. And here nothing is coming from the user in terms of jumping or climbing obstacles or crawling when there is something on top of the head of the robot. All the perception here is coming from the small camera that you see. It's a depth camera in front of the robot. And the feed-forward network is evaluated on a Raspberry Pi that is on the back of the robot. So it's a super light computational cost. The network is end-to-end, from pixels to motor decisions. So if we compare what we managed to achieve with model predictive control and what we are now doing with reinforcement learning, actually there is not so much in terms of difference of performance. Actually, a lot is coming from the hardware. We have seen tremendous improvement in the hardware of legged robots that I'm not seeing yet in terms of manipulation, and that's really game-changing. RL has not changed again, except in terms of the quantity of personnel that I need to operate my robot. With model predictive control, we were at least 10 persons trying to really collaborate on the robot, and it was barely working. With reinforcement learning, now a single student can deploy a policy in 3 months, training of the student included. And that, for me, is really what is making the big difference, is the size of the team. And that's allowed our team to deploy policies. That's policy that has been deployed since the beginning of the year on 4 different robots in my team, and that was never achieved before by any other teams before RL, right? Since RL, now it's common stuff. And it drives people to say that locomotion is a solved problem, which is, in my opinion, not true. These robots are not walking as good as we would like see them walking. But at least now, anybody is able to generate acceptable walk, acceptable gaits on the robot. Still, in my opinion, there is a lot of work to do in terms of improving, in particular, these solvers and make them faster and discover more easily good behaviors. And when we are comparing trajectory with policy optimization, that now more and more people are aware of, we are forgetting another direction, which is using gradient or without using gradient. So when we discuss MPC, actually, we are typically discussing trajectory optimization with gradients. When we discuss RL, we are typically discussing policy optimization without gradient. But you could go in the other extreme. So we are also investigating trajectory optimization without gradient. And in that case, randomized smoothing is a way to rationalize gradient-free algorithm. So in particular, we are investigating a classical algorithm called model path predictive integral, MPPI, which is a very classical trajectory optimization, and we can rewrite it just as a trajectory optimization that would be single shooting, so only optimizing the control, not the states, with randomized smoothing using some xplug rescaling. So what I mean by that is, if you consider the blue function here, which is not differentiable, and you try to give that to an algorithm with gradient, it would not work. If you randomize it, so basically if you convolute that with a Gaussian kernel, you would get the orange plot, which now you can get derivative from that. But you would see that this local minima is having nearly the same importance as this one, just because it's a little bit larger. If you now rescale that with a sum x log, so convoluting by something a little bit different, then you would give more importance to the deep local minimum. And now we wrote that MPPI algorithm as an optimization problem, then we can just play with it like we are doing with other optimization framework. For example, we can inject second order information and show that the classical MPPI, which is saturating very quickly, can be overpassed by the green one, which is using second order information, and that you would see here with a very poor behavior first order and a quite good behavior second order. The same generalized to reinforcement learning algorithm, where here the higher the better, but basically DDPG is overpassed by some exp rescaling on various benchmarks of the MuJoCo control suite. Then in practice, we deploy MPPI on robots by having long horizon. MPPI is reduced to a short horizon. We introduce long horizon using a learning of the value function and introduce constraint with the same discount modulation that we have in CAT, and show that we are able to deploy that on robots and having some generalization, zero shot. So here the robot is trained only on flat ground. There is some slope and the robot is able to cross this slope while PPO would not be able to do that. On the other extrema, we could try to do policy optimization with gradients. So that's something we would be able to do if we would have differentiable simulators. But first, we don't, not yet at least. Justin is going to show work in that direction. And second, even when we have some different simulators, the dynamics is super stiff, so you don't get a lot of information through gradients from the contact. On the other hand, there is some work that has been done to learn a smooth version of the dynamics and backprop through this smooth version of the dynamics. But then the problem is, okay, you have quite good gradients, but your rollouts are very weird. They are very quickly diverging because you have a chaotic system with a little bit of noise. You are very far from reality. So what we are doing is that we learn a model of a simulator that we have. The simulator is not differentiable. The model is, and then we backprop through the learned model while we forward rollouts through the simulator. Combining both of them, we are able to deploy some fancy behaviors like this handstand of the robot. And more important, we are able to show that we are much more efficient than PPO in terms of sample efficiency. So you see, this is PPO and this is us. We are definitely much more efficient. Each step, of course, is a little bit more expensive because we are backpropagating through the network. But more than that, it's because we have gradients. We are not super efficient in terms of parallelizing. So with 100 actors in parallel, 100 rollouts in parallel, we get all the information. While PPO is collecting gradient information through many more. Typically, when training in locomotion, we have 4,000 actors in parallel. We are not benefiting of the same scaling effect. But we are showing that if we go with larger models, so here we have a world model that has been trained on this task. So that's a visual task of pushing a T to a location. Here we train a world model of that, which is much bigger in terms of memory size. So we cannot, with PPO, have many rollouts in parallel. And here we are still much better in terms of sample efficiency, but now it also propagates to wall clock time. So we are also faster now than PPO. Finally, we are also continuously exploring combination of something that is learned offline with something that is deciding online in order to generalize, but more than that, in order to satisfy constraints. That's the only solution that I see in terms of having hard constraints defined at runtime. So basically projecting a decision that has been computed offline into the acceptable space. And so we do that by now diffusion models. So in particular, when there is obstacles, we want to diffuse a trajectory. So that would look like something like that. So that's typically a diffusion process with in the trajectory space. And here the work that we did is mostly how to encode the perception space, so to condition the diffusion model to a representation of the scene. And we did that through a slot attention mechanism that is basically an object-centric method, an object-centric representation that is rising from self-learning formulation. And with that, we are able to achieve some model predictive tasks with hard constraints of non-collision. For now, we have only trained the diffusion model on simulation images. So when we run on the real robot, we have to go back to the simulation images through these QR codes. So many work remains to be done in terms of just solving these problems, and that would have an impact on anything that is coming beyond. I really think that even if we are benefiting a lot of the data, we want to reinforce, we want to optimize the movement that has been done, especially if we want to transfer that to many targets and many tasks. In terms of taking advantage of these better solvers, a first point is that we see an increase of the authority we are giving to the solvers, and that's since a long time. 20 years ago, what we were using on robots were called inverse schematics. It was taking a very, very small amount of decision. Then we went to model predictive control, so the algorithm is able to decide the full trajectory. Now algorithms are able to decide the full policy. It's much better. What is coming next? For me, what is coming next is a co-design. So the algorithm being able to decide also the shape of the robot, and beyond the shape of the robot, the shape of the full factory. We want to decide the motion, but we want also to decide how the robots are organized and built. So here is a mock-up decided by the algorithm of the bipedal robot. That's a biped robot that you have seen earlier in my presentation. Second aspect is that we still need to make a drastic improvement in how we are solving these problems. I would like my problem to be able to explore in state space and not only in control space, to be able to respect hard constraints, to have a sharp convergence, not a convergence at 0.1 accuracy. I really want to go to 10 power minus 5, like any optimization problem should be able to do. And exploiting subgradients, because we have spent a lot of time, and in particular Justin is spending a lot of time to compute subgradients, and we want to exploit that. For now, there is no policy optimizer that is able to do that, and I really think that we are able to go in that direction, even if, again, so that's an example of an exploration done by a solver in a state space, where we are able to achieve grasping without a lot of reward shaping. And so even if we want to use data, and I want to use data, we have a lot of improvement to do in how to solve these problems. And yes, of course, we want to exploit data. So that's in particular because I'm not a fool, right? I know that there is a problem in defining the reward function. And that's a work done by Elliot Chansan, who was previously in Willow as a PhD and was then a postdoc with me. That noticed that a big part of the complexity of training something new in locomotion was because a PhD student would only accept to do that once, and then he would transfer his knowledge to a new PhD student that would only accept to do that once because it's too boring. So instead of training a student to basically recognize what is an acceptable behavior or not in simulation, you would train a video classifier to say, is that a good walking task? Is that a good jumping task? And because we don't have enough robot data, it trains that through a lot of cross-embodiment by using animals in the wild. And this is some examples of the behavior that he managed to learn with some pictures that we have selected, some videos that we have selected from the data set. There is no transfer from one video to the robot. It's more we see some similarities, and we found that kind of funny that the robot is walking like a giraffe. There is no reason, right? He saw many other animals walking or jumping like a, well, I don't know, kangaroo maybe. So yeah, there is a lot to do in terms of learning from data. But I think mostly what we want to do learning from data is to learn a regularization that would replace the very sophisticated reward that we are having. And then process that by reinforcement learning to optimize the motion and transfer that efficiently to robots that are able to solve constraints. Thank you for your attention.